Hey, everyone. This week, we're going to talk about, actually, we're going to interview a couple of people first. You're going to want to stay tuned as Jen Ellis and Harley Geiger will be here from Rapid 7 for a feature interview. Then Alex Horan and Sebastian Botnets from Onapsis will be here to update us on Onapsis research labs and other things in the SAP security world. In our security news for the week, experts encourage Congress to act on IoT security. And let's just say, like, it didn't go so well. Wi-Fi can imprint passwords on pins onto radio signals. Major Russian banks are hacked with powerful IoT device-focused botnets. We're going to meet Poison Tap, which is like Spinal Tap, but different. I want to talk about a silly article about beautiful science cocktails, and I think we know someone who might be able to help us out with that. There's a major security hole in Linux, which requires that you hold down a key. All that and more on this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Security Weekly is brought to you by the SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer security training, certification, and research. Visit SANS.org to explore the full curriculum and latest training offerings. Onapsis, the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business-critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsis.com. Pony Express. Check out their line of penetration testing devices, including the Pwn Pad, the Pwn Phone, and the Pwn Pro. For enterprises, there's Pwn Pulse, providing continuous visibility into wired, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth spectrums across all physical locations, including remote sites and branch offices. For all those hard-to-reach places, there's Pony Express. Visit them on the web at ponyexpress.com.
Welcome to the show. My name's Paul Asadorian. Oh, no, wait. I shave off my beard and I forget who I am. That's that guy over there. Your host, Paul Asadorian.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Paul's Security Weekly, episode 490. This is November 17th, and we're broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. I have across the table from me, which you can't. If we cut to the other shot, it's basically Larry and I sitting around a gigantic table.
Hey, can you pass
there
the
we
salt?
are.
Can you pass the salt?
Yes. I'll trade you for the mashed potatoes over there.
Okay. Yeah. Get that right in. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Man, if I had known it was going to be that kind of party, I'd have stuck my... Never mind.
Yes. No, there's actually no mashed potatoes. We do have cocktails, though, and a fabulous show where both of our guests... the majority of them, I think except for Harley, are live in studio. But both folks from Onapsis and Rapid 7 are in the Boston area, and there's traffic. So we're going to introduce the rest of the fabulous host of the show, and then we're going to do Security News of the Week to give everyone a little extra travel time. On the lines via Skype, on his way to Australia to get me a wombat, Mr. Joff Thayer. He's a security researcher for Black Hills Information Security and an INS faculty member and SANS instructor. Joff, welcome to the show.
G'day, Paul. How are you? It's good to be here again on this lovely Thursday. Yes, I am going to Australia this week for a accent refresher course. So I'll come back sounding even weirder than normal.
Make sure you enjoy some shrimp on the Barbie.
God, they call those prawns in Australia.
That's right. Prawns on the Barbie.
There you go.
Mr. Jeff Mann, security curmudgeon, PCI expert, and wearer of tie-dye shirts, apparently, is here with us on the show. Jeff, welcome to Security
Thank you.
Weekly.
This is the shirt from B-Sides Charleston, where I spoke last weekend. So
Nice.
Quick shout out to B-Sides Charleston.
Excellent. Carlos, where? I don't see Carlos. Oh, Carlos, you there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hey, hola, Carlos. It's been a little while. It's good to have you on the show.
Yeah, been a lot of traveling.
Yeah, you've been busy lately?
Yeah.
Are you still director of reverse engineering for Tenable Network Security?
I'm still the director of reverse engineering. Haven't been fired yet.
Haven't reverse engineered yourself out of a job.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Well, it's nice to have you on the show this evening, Carlos. Just a couple of quick announcements before we get into it. I want to remind everyone, go to securityweekly.com/subscribe. This is where you can subscribe to this show and our other 3 shows on the network. Some of the survey feedback that I've been getting is kind of interesting. People are like, I really wish that you had a show that talked about enterprise defense and enterprise security solutions.
Well,
And
you
I'm
got that.
we got
that.
So I want to just a reminder for everyone to go to securityweekly.com/subscribe, where you can subscribe to all of our shows, which are growing in the areas where we're distributing them. So no matter how you listen to podcasts, you should be able to find us. We work every week to make sure that our podcast is readily available. Ones we're working on are iHeartRadio and Spotify. And if someone can convince Pandora to host podcasts, that'd be awesome too, because we'd like to be in there too.
All the places, all the time.
All the things. So make sure, speaking of our survey, make sure you take our super cool survey, securityweekly.com/survey. Look, this is your chance to tell us what to do, essentially. If you want to see a new show, if you want to see us talk about a particular topic, this is your chance to tell us what you want to see on this network. The feedback we've received so far has been absolutely spectacular. I want to thank everyone who's filled out the survey. It is helping shape, not only help us get the right advertisers, but help us get the right information to shape the show content so that everyone likes listening to the show, even still.
Is that the real reason why Larry shaved the beard?
No, I don't know why Larry shaved his beard.
It was getting scraggly because it was really long, and I trimmed it all off and noted that everything was all like not shaped right. So I'm like, you know what? My face hasn't seen the light of day since we did that Movember thing. How long ago?
A long time ago.
A long time ago. That was the last time I had actually shaved my face
I
clean.
was hoping for something more funnier, like I had this yeast infection. No.
Yeah, no, the face just hasn't seen the light of day, and well, now I just can't hide the chain link fence mark anymore.
Wow.
Catch you to
Okay, that was way too much information. So go to securityweekly.com/survey. I also want to thank the New England ISSA chapter. Our good friend Steve Moscarelli was there hosting, where I give my presentation titled "Everything I Need to Know About Security I Learned from Watching Kung Fu Movies." I was on the fence as to like how this talk was going to go. I think I pulled it off. The feedback I got was good. I don't know if I'll get any hate mail from it. So hopefully you'll see that talk at upcoming conferences in 2017.
Guaranteed you'll get hate mail from it.
Probably.
We get hate mail for everything.
We do.
But we get a lot more good mail than anything.
We do. For all of the negative feedback, there is 3 times the positive feedback. So, but be honest when you give us feedback, by the way.
Absolutely.
So we're going to go right into stories for the week. I want to talk about experts trying to tell Congress, telling Congress, and met with much opposition, that there should be, and a listener pointed out in listener feedback, that there's a big difference between regulation and some kind of standards. And I think Jeff could probably speak to this too. Like, PCI is a standard, it's not a regulation, right?
Right, and PCI is more or less private. It's not a government produced thing, be it a regulation or a standard. So the regulation, I think, in general means the government's putting it out there.
Right. But the government can also put out guidelines and policies that people should abide by, right? But if it's not backed up with actual laws and stuff, then it's not a regulation, right? So I mean, there are the whole gist of this article, to spare the time of reading it, is basically Bruce Schneier was like, look, the government needs to regulate here. The companies that are producing these products and the consumers of these products both don't care about security, as we talked about last week. So therefore, the government should step in and put regulation, because the bad things that are happening to people who are not the makers of the product or the consumers of the product. They're happening to other people on the internet. And basically, go ahead, Jeff.
I'm sorry, Paul. May I interject?
Yes, please do.
Please do, my good man.
You stumbled upon, I think, a very important key word, and that is the word "should." Regulations tend to be you must do this, where guidelines, standards, anything else that any entity puts out that is meant to be best practice, those are should. Regulations tend to be you must do this.
And Bruce Schneier made the analogy to the Congress and said, like pollution, the only solution is to regulate. And he said the government could impose minimum security standards on IoT manufacturers, forcing them to make their devices secure, even though their customers don't care. But they're on both sides of the political party spectrum was met with much opposition. And they said really things that make me realize that much of Congress doesn't understand technology. And basically we're like, well, you should just impose guidelines and make people abide by the guidelines. The problem is that we've tried that and it largely hasn't worked.
If I may interject a moment,
Jeff.
Paul. One of the challenges, having been in the position prior of trying to differentiate between policy and standard, one of the challenges that people run into is to overstep, and that is to have some sort of, I'll say, regulation that is too prescriptive and is too tied to current technology of the day. And if there is an overstep like that, it can be negative in its long-term impact. So I think the best possible course of action is to at least regulate in terms of high-level guidelines and high-level sort of milestones that need to be met, but not be too prescriptive in terms of the actual names of technology, because technology changes.
Yeah, Jeff, on that point, I was thinking when you said what you just said, that I think regulation. Sure, let her in. I think regulation tends to be, especially in the technology internet space, tends to be sometimes really extremely old and outdated. I mean, the Telecommunications Act that we were under when we first started, was tied to telegraph communications from the early 1900s. And sometimes it hasn't been updated from that type of thing. I see Larry is ready to say something. I will pass the baton to Larry.
Actually, no, I was just griping about
clearing your throat?
Yeah, about the regulations being tied directly to telegraph and.
Well,
yeah,
there's a danger in. Well, I think the regulations tend to be, and I think a lot of people think that they're somewhat slow and outdated. Technology is moving way too quickly for traditional governing bodies to do all the things that they do to try to produce some sort of policy or some sort of regulatory standard. So we're almost stuck with outdated stuff until the new comes along. But when the new comes along, it's outdated because we've already moved on to something else.
I mean, just to interject an example, you could say words to the effect of, thou shalt encrypt using AES 256-bit encryption. Or you could say, thou shalt encrypt using the currently best accepted standard for encryption today. There's a difference between those two statements. In that if you get too prescriptive, you end up with an outdated statement, within maybe a year, maybe 6 months. If you veer away from being too prescriptive and talk in general terms of expecting to meet certain bars and certain levels that are very generalistic in nature, then I think you're going to be much better off in the long term.
Bruce and I are called for a new regulatory agency to be created to essentially regulate IoT devices in this country. Come on in and sit down, Jen. It's fine. We're good. Guest joining us. Welcome, Jen.
Quick comment on this.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, Jeff, you've dealt with laws and regulations more than I think everybody here. How about the regulations be based on impact? Like if, as Jeff mentioned, technology changes. If we're too prescriptive, it will get outdated rather quickly. What if we regulate on the basis of risk and impact that may occur by this devices not being properly configured, properly updated, properly secured?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to think of it. In the payment space in the last year or two, there's been a little bit of a stir amongst merchants to try to move beyond PCI standards for whatever reason. But one of the things that they're looking at is cyber insurance, insurance policies. Why bother spending the millions to do all this security stuff that we don't understand if we're just going to be breached anyway? Why don't we just get a good insurance policy? What's interesting, though, is the insurance policies. And if anybody's ever had to file an insurance claim for whatever reason, you are probably aware of this. Insurance companies don't like to pay out. So, if you think the regulatory bodies, the standards bodies, and the enforcers are tough on you now as a company, wait till an insurance company comes along and is trying, and they would absolutely apply things like risk and things that like impact. Like, were you doing the proper due diligence? Were you doing the things that you should have been doing anyway? The basics, and if you're determined to have not. Guess what? You lose.
Yeah, you think about same thing. I see so many things wrong with cyber insurance and potentially some of those disasters. If you're just going to use cyber insurance as your crutches to not taking security seriously, you're going to find that you're going to have a pretty hard time. You're not going to be the only one that's going to do it, and then the industry is going to be a freaking disaster. The cybersecurity industry, cybersecurity insurance.
It's not
industry.
fixing the problem.
No, it's not.
Right, at all. And so some of the arguments, and Jen Ellis is here with us. Jen, welcome to the show. Nice to have you here. I wanted to include you in this conversation and get your thoughts on it as well. We're talking about the potential regulation of IoT devices and the industry that creates them in the U.S. And the arguments from from Congress are, one, they don't want to stifle innovation, and two, all these devices come from China. So I don't know if you spent any time thinking about this whole IoT thing and all the recent things.
I've heard of IoT, yeah.
We spent way too much time talking about it, and our listeners have heard us talk about it a lot, so I want to get someone else to talk about it, essentially. Yes.
Just to mention, Harley, I think, is on.
Hey, Harley, how are you?
Doing good, thanks. How are you guys doing?
Good, wonderful. We're talking about IoT.
I've heard of the IoT.
Yes, and specifically we're talking about how Bruce and I was just in front of Congress asking them for government regulation. I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so, I am very familiar with the whole it stifles innovation argument. And I think there are elements about that are true.
Mm-hmm.
The cost that you're pushing on people, the requirement, I have this story that I like to roll out sometimes about how I met this guy at an IoT event, and he was working for an early stage startup, and they make a post-operative care wristband, and it monitors your vitals. Mm-hmm. So you get released from hospital faster, they pick up problems faster, like all stuff that you can point to and go, hey, that's really cool and neat, and I love that idea. So I said to him, okay, well, that's cool. How do you think about building security into your software development? And he goes, we don't make software. I was like, that's interesting. So how do people interact with the device? Like, how do they get the information? And he was like, there's an app.
Okay.
And I was like, I did the Stewie Griffin, my head went sideways. And I was like, you know that the app is software, right?
No,
And
it's just an app.
Right. And he kind of looked at me and then went to the bar and ignored me. And I had that moment of realizing that he's probably not the exception. He's probably the rule for his size of organization. And for a startup like his, which is, 12 people maybe, the idea that they're going to have a person that does security, that's going to cripple their business. It's not realistic to think about that.
Well, not to mention if there was some kind of fee that you had to get the devices registered to pay for testing, which we talked about last week,
right,
they would prevent the entry into the market. That's my concern.
Exactly right.
Yep.
But what I do think you can...
Sorry, go ahead, Harley.
So I think you're going to run into a definitional question really quickly if you try to regulate IoT, right? Because it's such a huge category of devices and they present different risks. And something like a car is going to be regulated differently than something like a light bulb, just because of the risks that are involved. And a lot of the small operators, generally speaking, I question whether they're making IoT devices that are going to have the same types of safety risks as the larger companies that are. And I think that there's also a sliding scale for what kind of regulation we're talking about. If it's just building in an updatability or a field upgradability capability into the device, that's going to be a lot different than having a full suite of security protections that have to be maintained throughout the course of the device's life cycle or even after. So I think it's going to be very complicated to try to regulate IoT. But I also think that if the industry doesn't do something on its own, those calls are going to persist.
Right. And I just want to say, for people who don't know, Harley was a congressional staffer. So he really has tackled in the most meaningful way, hands-on, how do you regulate? What does it mean to have legislation? How do you write that? And so he definitely knows what he's talking about in this regard.
So Harley, along those lines, thank you for the background there, Jen. The argument from Congress was most of these devices come from outside the U.S. and they're imported into the U.S. Would there or could there be different guidelines or suggestions that aren't as strict as regulations, or could there be regulations that regulate the importation of these goods that are IoT devices from other countries and bring them up to a minimum security standard?
So if the question is just whether Congress can regulate devices or software that's coming from overseas, the answer is yes. They can do it in different ways. It can be an import regulation, or it can simply regulate the use or distribution of something here in the United States. I mean, a grenade launcher made in Russia is still not legal in the United States. It's not really a barrier.
All right, this reminds me of very much the FCC sort of application of that, in that stuff made outside of the country that comes here that has a transmitter still has to go to the FCC to be approved to be used here.
But pharmaceuticals fall into a different category. I can totally go to a website and order pharmaceuticals from another country. Is that legal and just not FDA regulated?
Or you have?
No, I'm saying theoretically, I could. I'm not saying I have.
We're not recording right now.
So can I interject one question? And maybe this is
hold on, Jeff. Let Harley answer my question first. Hold on, and then we'll get to yours.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead, Harley.
That probably just means that the regulation is on sale in the United States. If it was something that was regulated at the point of consumption, like if the regulation was you cannot buy this or you cannot consume this, then that would be totally different. But if the regulation says you cannot sell this in the United States, then maybe you are able to get it on the internet and have it still be illegal.
Right.
So there's a variety of ways that a regulation can take shape. The fact that it comes from something like a place like China or somewhere else overseas, what that really means in practice is that it's harder to enforce, and it also means that it's probably going to be more difficult for consumers to swap out a device, if we're talking about a recall situation.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because we have this trade embargo with Cuba, And that actually is illegal for you to import Cuban cigars into the United States.
I knew there was a cigar reference
Right,
coming.
yeah, I knew this was coming.
Yeah. So there are websites that you can go to another country and buy them, and you just kind of roll the dice whether U.S. Customs is gonna find it. And when they find it the first time, they're like, slap on the wrist, bad boy, Paul, you should never do that again. They write you a letter. Fortunately, I haven't gotten a letter. I have a lot of friends that have letters hanging up in their office that have that. And then the second time, like, you get into real trouble. Like, there's fines and imprisonment and all that kind of stuff. But like the first time, like, you just get a slap on the wrist.
The first one's free.
The first one's free. Yeah.
Again, hypothetically.
Hypothetically,
Right.
if
So you've
yes.
heard from your friends on the
So
internet.
going back to the points that you're making about the FCC and the FDA and drugs and Harley's point about definition being a challenge here, I think that's where you see the regulation come in, is you'll see it in specific verticals. So you'll see NHTSA has issued a draft of something that they may put out that would have some requirements in it for automotives. The FDA has already put out draft post-market guidance and got comments back, which they did in January, and they're gearing up to hopefully publish a sort of final, this is it. And actually,
Wait, for which? FDA?
FDA for medical devices.
Okay.
And in the case of the FDA, we've seen and heard that it is changing behavior amongst medical device manufacturers. So you can see in certain key verticals that are more heavily regulated already that's where it's easier to build in regulation, and they often align with things that, to Harley's point, relate more to harm, where it makes more sense to consider regulation. I do think there are some basic things that I think a lot of security people point to and say, it would be good if. So I think there's a general view that if you can mandate that anyone creating a device has some way for it to be updated, that's a good thing.
Yeah,
so
that's
an important caveat with the things that Jen had mentioned. So Jen, you talked about NHTSA guidance for cars, FDA for medical devices. We're also seeing guidance from the Department of Homeland Security on IoT. The Department of Commerce is coming out with something. There are a lot of agencies that are putting something out right now or recently on IoT security. The Federal Trade Commission did the same thing. And all of these are not regulation. They're not required. They're guidance. They're voluntary. But as I said before, if the industry continues to ignore these types of documents, and if IoT remains as insecure in the future as it is right now, then what's the next step from something that's voluntary?
And it's curious. It kind of leads into our next story where some major Russian banks were taken down.
Yeah.
And
I want to hit back on that comment real quick before you do that.
Sure.
And just because I've got some sort of skin in the game currently on the IoT document stuff that we're finishing out our stuff. But I've gone through and I read the NIST documentation on how to secure how to secure the IoT, as they put it, and because it seems incredibly awkward how they say that. And I read that documentation and the advice and what they give on how to secure IoT, and I'm like, what the hell is this? Because this talks nothing about all of the problems. It talks about that stuff talks together, and it talks together, and like you need to make it talk together, and you need to do it right. But it's very vague, and I don't even know what the right word for it is, but it's super vague, and it's hard to apply in. I have this device and it has a Linux kernel on it. What do I do?
Right.
Well, you turn it into a network of things. Like, I don't understand.
Can I ask one question,
Go,
Paul? And that's this. Not that I want to extend the discussion in. This is a deep topic for sure. The question is this: why would we not consider some sort of trade barrier for devices that don't meet a certain bar that we could, help the regulators define? And I know that's wading into kind of a sticky area, but if we could avoid these things being sold in the country, would we not avoid a lot of the follow-on issues that we're discussing that we're trying to regulate? Maybe we could get ahead of it. And avoid the actual devices entering the
That
country.
starts to sound like gun control, though. If you want that Internet of Device, Internet of Things device, you're going to get it.
What it sounds like is a potential trigger for a trade war. is what it sounds
Yeah,
like.
well, that's certainly true. That's certainly true. But
Sounds like a
I'm
BBS
just
door game to me.
But we
I
are
guess I'm throwing
actually
bombs, right?
we are actually starting to hear mutterings and rumors about export controls for IoT. Which again, I mean, going back to Harley's initial point of that's hilarious because if you're talking about export controls for IoT, you're talking about export controls for everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point.
But just software, not apps.
Right. You've got to draw a line somewhere, right?
I
Well,
mean,
it bothers me. You know what Jen brought up. What bothers me a little bit or maybe it was Harley, or maybe it was both. That there's such a multitude of agencies getting involved with different guidelines. It seems like it's a fragmented landscape right now that we need to somehow bring together.
Well, I think there's actually an effort right now. I'm part of an effort. It is affiliated with the Department of Commerce in a complicated way. Anyway, to look at these types of guidelines and see what commonalities exist for at least for field upgradability for the patching feature that we want IoT to have. But yeah, the plethora of guidelines, a lot of them are redundant. They do overlap. I don't think that there's a lot that's contradictory because I think that the principles, at least, of IoT security seem relatively well agreed upon. But at the same time, in the absence of any regulation, we have to understand these agencies, it's their job to regulate a certain area, to protect a certain area, and they're trying to figure out how IoT fits within that. I do agree that it needs to be coordinated and they need to be consistent, but I'm not sure how inconsistent their different documents are right now.
it'll be interesting to see how bad the problem needs to get before someone does something to fix it. We just had major Russian banks were taken down, which I'm not sure why you would DDoS a bank. I mean, I guess if you're attacking Russia and you wanted to disrupt their economy, you would DDoS their banks. But Kaspersky is saying what a lot of other people have been saying, although when it comes from them, it carries a little more weight. And they're just saying that this is hinting at a larger attack that may be coming in the future. And that's where I get concerned. What happens when the whole internet is just down for a long time?
What if you used a botnet to cause a DDoS
I know where you're
as a
going with this.
distraction? What if it was just a distraction,
Exactly.
so that you would obfuscate the real thing that you're doing behind? I mean, because it's a bank, I'm thinking, maybe they're trying to do something behind the scenes.
That very well could be especially in this case.
I would also be really surprised if these were not tests for some sort of larger capability.
Yeah.
And that was brought up with Brian Krebs. And I mean, look, we haven't really had a war yet that is played out in a large way in cyberspace, and I would expect that DDoS attacks would be a large part of that. And I think it's perfectly
that
plausible.
we publicly know about.
That's right. That we
That's
publicly know about. Although
But
I think when Russia invaded Georgia, there was a lot of cyber attacks on the Georgian government web holdings and networks, and so. But that's at a relatively smaller scale than what we're talking about here, because these web attacks that we're seeing lately are really massive.
Yeah, I mean, unless I'm wrong, I think there's a historical precedent for this as well. I mean, the point-of-sale malware, I believe, was tested in the Eastern Bloc countries fairly extensively before it hit the United States. So, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think I am. Which to me indicates, history tends to repeat itself. It sort of lends an air of truth to what you're saying.
So what was the ultimate deal with the one from this Russian bank, Paul?
I pretty much summarized that. I don't have any more details than that.
Okay.
I want to know where
Neither
you
does the
thought I
article.
was going, though.
So I thought you were going to be talking about Krebs, but
Oh no.
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 imagine if you will. Oh wait, it already happened.
Right. No, I did not get his word in bingo today.
A botnet attacking another botnet.
So presumably what this means is that we have to form a cyber militia now, and we all have to enlist.
Don't we have one of those? They wear the masks. And,
What was I th- No, that's so 5 years ago.
That's
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Don't
Remember the 7th of... wait, no.
I think they call that F Society, or is that? Am I getting? No, I'm getting that confused with it.
Anonymous? I don't know.
Right. And
Yeah.
So, Jeff, you had a story in there about a major Linux security hole, which we seem to be covering more and more these days, are major flaws in Linux, which I just bought a Linux laptop, which is kind of interesting.
I was going to say I would have turned it on, but they didn't send the power brick.
They did it. They made right for that, though. Okay, they
Agreed.
did. And they've been
Agreed.
really busy lately, and their support was really awesome. So I did give them the benefit of the doubt. I did not want to publicly shame them for doing that, because I don't like to do that to companies.
Oh, sorry.
So when you watch the show and I have the laptop, you'll see how beautiful it is.
You're a good man, Paul.
Once I have power. So, John.
This one is stupidly simple, which is sort of embarrassing for everybody, I think. The security hole we're talking about is contained within the Linux Unified Key Setup on disk format, which is otherwise known as LUKS. It's a standard mechanism for implementing Linux hard disk encryption. It goes like this. If you hold down the Enter key for, I think, some 70 seconds,
Yes.
LUKS happily, during the boot process, right, LUKS will happily drop you to a root shell. That's a little bit embarrassing.
No, wait.
Right?
Well, it's an init RAMFS shell, so yeah, essentially.
well, it
a root
is,
shell,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the question is, like, how does it interrupt
Is it
the
a-
boot process so that it stops for 70 seconds?
No, you have to hold it down for 70 seconds, and then it basically, the source code is right here. It basically panics and says,
Yep.
"Oh my God, dropping you into a shell for whatever reason." We're doing a show, so I don't have time to like analyze the
Yeah,
whole
no,
source code.
because I was wondering,
I'm
like,
just summarizing.
you have to hold it down while it's doing boot, and if it's doing boot, whose machine takes 70 seconds to boot?
Well, maybe it stopped during that.
Right,
That's your
right,
question.
yeah,
It
yeah.
stopped during
Paul's
the,
new one.
Yes, apparently.
The source code's published in the article. It's an init script. It's just a little embarrassing, really.
I'm just trying to picture the people that are out there. Every single step of an install of an OS or an app or software, holding the Enter button down now for 2 minutes or 3 minutes just to see what happens.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. You can understand why this didn't get tested.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, too, the file system is still, Geoff, correct me if I'm wrong, the file system is still encrypted, right?
It drops you to the BusyBox root shell, so I believe the file system's still encrypted.
So you can then brute force to break the encryption or guess the encryption key, I would imagine, on the file system.
Well, I'm guessing, that you could guess. But you've got a BusyBox root shell, so you can certainly denial of service, for lack of a better word, is possible, right? You can destroy the system.
You can, yes.
At that point,
But you already have physical access.
you have physical access. Right.
Right,
So,
so you could-
one has to question how bad this is, because physical access, Carlos makes a good point. Physical access is physical access, and if you have physical access to just about any system, you can boot it off of any media, right? So
Yeah, the way I see it is just a very nice bug that got overhyped.
Yeah, I'm reading this article, and I'm doing the Stewie head turn again to quote something that was fantastic from earlier. It says you can't use this to break into users' encrypted partitions, but of course you can still wreck them. Now you're saying, what does this matter? You still need to be at a console, so you've got physical access, and they say, true, I have one word for you, cloud. You can use this attack to remotely exploit this vulnerability without having physical access.
What?
How?
how?
So I get to press enter on a bunch of machines in the AWS data center? I don't understand.
Well, it depends. Remember that some of the virtualization interfaces actually give you as if you're having an IPMI connection. So you're able to actually just send the enter key to the VM and you get into that box. But then again, you have to be in the admin console for that VM.
Yeah.
That's like having physical access.
Which case is game over. Linode, which we use, has a virtual console. I forget what they call it. But yeah.
So yeah, the way I see it is a bit overhyped. It got a very nice headline and it got a bunch of clicks.
And I imagine how this was discovered. That some dude left his laptop at the boot screen and his cat sat on it.
I was going to say there would have to be a cat involved.
Cat or book or something like that.
Yeah, something
Sitting
fell
on
on it.
Yeah, and he was like, "Oh, crap! I got a busy box shell." Oh, how'd that happen?
In my case, like a really long cigar ash, it would fall like perfectly.
That's some heavy ash.
Yes.
I've heard that about Paul.
It's all about you sucking on cigars, isn't it, Paul?
This is Poison Tap, not Spinal Tap. Poison Tap.
Nice.
Did you guys read this about
did.
Sammy
I
Kamkar?
did.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Didn't Hack 5 make a device that's like the same thing as this?
It's different.
What did they call it?
They're different. The Hack 5 one, what it's actually abusing is NTLM, LLMR, so multicast resolution there. So what you're actually just getting is the NTLM hash, so you're able to break that. If you, for some reason,
Carlos,
want
is that
to Mac OS,
is that the LAN turtle, which creates that network adapter, and then that's
that's the technique that Rob Fuller concocted together of several tools. That will actually just give you an NTLM hash. If you have a Mac and you enable sharing, and you'll get a prompt for you to enter your password. What it'll actually do is it will turn that into a LAN hash, an NTLM hash, and store it with your SHA-512 hash inside of Mac OS. And if you've done that, then that will also pass, if you're using Mac OS, your credentials. In the case of the Lantern, in the case of Poison Tap, it actually goes a bit further. What it actually does, it attacks specifically a web browser. You need to have a web browser running when you lock that machine. So when it connects, it actually turns into a NIC device. And then what it does is man in the middle solve DNS, mans in the middle all of your internet connections, and it will actually just start creating iframes, and it will start trying to collect the cookies for those sessions. It will also create persistence in the system via JavaScript, so you're able to execute commands on the system via JavaScript, depending if you actually enable JavaScript on your browser, which sadly most of us actually do, since we need it for most of the web applications out there. And once your browser, all of that stuff is cached and is persistent in your cache, you just disconnect the device, and now you have a machine that you control, that you own. Since it's going back to your command and control node, you can actually control that machine, issue certain commands, issue certain actions, and then you can use those cookies that you impersonated to do whatever action you need. Now, if you don't have your web browser up, it doesn't work. It needs a web browser. If you're a Mac OS and you suspended the machine, and you have file system encryption, and it comes back up, it will block that type of connection until you enter your credentials in the case of Mac OS. If you haven't encrypted your drive, it will actually work without a problem. In the case of Windows, I'm not sure. I think even if you have your machine locked and it sees that NIC interface, the way that Windows and Mac OS work is that they see you with a wired connection and they see a wireless connection. The algorithm, the way it works, if the connection is not AC, it will automatically shift to your wired connection, and that because it will always think that a wired connection is faster, so it will force all of your traffic through there.
Interesting.
And is it that if the website does not require HTTPS, then Poison Tap can degrade it to HTTP?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
And it actually has its own database of websites that it wants to collect.
Yep. The top 1 million rated sites by Alexa.
And he's doing this all on a Raspberry Pi Zero.
Yep. $5 was
like, is it $5?
$5 plus the SD card.
Kind of
So
amazing.
depending on how
Well, yeah,
how large
we all
how large the SD card, the micro SD card is. You're pulling those.
We're
for
all
$5.
nerds. We're all nerds and have spent way too much time researching like the cost and speed of various SD cards.
Yep.
Yep.
This one right here, $40.
And you read
Yet
how
another
many
argument for
websites and
encryption.
speed tests before you determined which one you'd purchase? 'Cause
None. I
With
mean-
me, it's about 3.
Actually, none. I made my intern do it.
Yeah, there you go.
128 gig. Was it like class 10 micro SD
Nice.
for $40?
That's awesome. You'll have to send
Another
that.
argument for encryption by default.
Yes.
Well, and it's interesting on Sammy's website, the remediations to prevent against this attack. One of them is actually fill your USB ports with cement, and he actually links you to Amazon to like a bucket of like pre-mixed cement. Which
That's pretty awesome.
I thought it was kind
That
of.
is amazing.
There was another.
Hey,
there
you
was a, go ahead, Joe.
Practical use for the lube there. Just shove some of that in your USB port.
Yep. There was another one that someone was saying that there's another app that you can use on Linux or OS 10 as a Python script that effectively monitors for any changes in USB state.
Yes, I've seen that. Larry.
And I can't
Yes,
remember.
I can't remember what that is
and
either
I
now.
had it in the browser on the other machine that I didn't take out of the bag, but
It's on my other machine.
it's
Well,
on
I can
my
tell
other
you what
machine.
though, my
Is that from
Linux.
Jonathan Sadowski?
say that again.
The one from Jonathan Sadowski that has been writing and promoting recently?
I don't know.
An app?
No, we can Google that though.
Yeah.
I tell you what though, my new Linux laptop that has 2 dead batteries, completely impervious to this attack right now.
Yep, you're absolutely
Saying.
correct. You're absolutely correct. Now, the thing for that particular defense with the Python script that runs monitors for USB activity, so you can set it so that if there's any change, it wipes your drive. Like the first time I forget and plug something in, I'm like,
What was that movie
right.
with Will Smith and Gene Hackman when he blows up the building? I think-
Enemy of the state.
Enemy of the
Enemy of State. Thank you. That
Yep.
kind of sounds like
Yep.
something he would do.
Now the
Yeah.
other one, sorry, in addition to not wiping the drives, you can have it so it just immediately shuts down. I can see the first time I'm teaching in front of a SANS class and I go and plug a USB, I'm
Right.
like, hey, what? Oh,
Oh my!
break time.
Now, Paul, you say Linux is not vulnerable, but then again, Sammy didn't test against Linux.
Oh no!
no,
I
Linux
said
is
my Linux laptop isn't vulnerable because it's a long story, Carlos. I ordered from a company and they inadvertently forgot to ship me my power brick. Yeah,
It's not vulnerable because it has no power.
it has no power.
It's not on.
It's not also
you're the-
terribly useful at the moment.
So you then went fancy and went with the Dell XPS Developer Edition.
Yes, you did.
I wanted to. I mean, we could do a whole show about how much time Paul spent and what he learned researching his new laptop. I liked the XPS 13 Developer Edition. The 15-inch XPS laptops didn't have the new processors on them yet, and I really wanted the 7th generation Intel processors. So in the XPS 13 Professional, you can get the latest gen processor, but you're limited to 16 gigs of RAM. Same with Apple and the abomination on their laptops they created recently. So I
XPS
went.
13, so I know.
Yeah, XPS 13s are really good. You do get the latest processor if you can live with 16 gigs of RAM. I wanted 32. So I went with a System 76 Linux laptop with Ubuntu 16.10 and 32 gigs of RAM. And it's a 14-inch laptop, so it's kind of in between, which it's beautiful, by the way. I think they're overwhelmed with orders. Their support is really great. I will give them that. They're all really nice.
Yeah, I have to say, I've never on a laptop. I've been more than happy with 16 gigs so far on all of my systems. I tend to run all of my VMs in a separate box typically.
Yeah, I wanted some flexibility to run VMware. So anyway, for those that are tracking my Paul's laptop purchase, because I sent out lots of tweets like, what does everyone think about the XPS 13? And what does everyone think about I was like tweeting it, and it was really spent way too much time on it.
Does your laptop have its own Twitter handle?
It's good. It should at this point.
By the end of this, it will.
Yes, it should at this point.
If not, someone will buy a domain name for it.
Larry.
Yes.
Paul'sOtherLaptop.com.
Larry, did you see this article? Wi-Fi can imprint passwords and pins onto radio signals. I didn't finish reading it before the show. I thought this was of interest to you. I kind of put it in there for you.
It's it's unbelievable some of the things that folks are starting to be able to figure out that they can do with RF analysis nowadays. And I think, I really hate to, well, I don't know if I hate to say it, but I think the proliferation of software-defined radio has really turned a lot of folks on into doing SIGINT with this type of stuff. And
this one's called Wind Talker. And I mean, Larry, you're a big fan of Breaking Wind, so
I mean, who isn't?
Oh, wow.
Jeez. You feel so much better when it's done.
it says that can enable a hacker to infer the sensitive keystrokes on a mobile device through Wi-Fi-based side channel information.
Right. So effectively, what is happening is it is trying, what I'm gathering from this article is it is doing detection of RF. So say you're using your laptop on Wi-Fi, and when you move your hands over the keyboard, you're effectively changing the multipath environment of the RF emissions from the antenna or your mobile device, and they're finding those unique fluctuations if they're close enough, and they can possibly recover keystrokes by where your fingers are positioned on the keyboard. And I'm like, whoa, this is cloak and dagger. And then you read the whole limitations of the attack. So the attack only works with one model of Wi-Fi network card. It relies on modified firmware that is prone to crashing.
Oh, we've been there.
It works only on unencrypted networks, which is kind of weird. Probably because they need data to be able to, I don't know. The tests were done in what looks like a rather sterile radio environment. It relies on a constant stream of network replies from your phone, 800 ping replies per second. And it doesn't seem to scale from pin entry to full-on passwords.
If it's a sterile network environment, does that mean it doesn't replicate?
Yes.
So
effectively, they conducted the test.
Thanks for playing.
If I think about this test, they used it special firmware on a special wireless card that crashes a lot in a Faraday cage, and you can only get pins, no passwords yet. And you still need to have tons of data coming to and from the mobile device, in this case, the phone, to make it happen.
And read between the lines, prone to a metric ass shit ton of false positives. So
Yep.
So
this was really hard to do 30 years ago.
Yeah,
I didn't say that.
But I'm going to say, whoa! And now that some noob off the street could do this, as opposed to large government organizations 30 years ago, what does the next 30 years bring?
Right.
it brings cool cocktails. Did you see my cocktail link in there?
No.
So apparently, Russell, who comes on the show, he makes these science, like he actually paid attention in chemistry class, unlike I did. And he's like, dude, no, like you can make some really cool cocktails. You have to just see it to believe. Molecular mixology, we're told by our production staff. Thank you very much.
Wait a minute, who is this? Who does this?
Wow.
Have you ever seen Fringe?
Yes.
And you know the crazy guy, Walter Bishop?
Sure.
Like if he's the crazy, really smart scientist guy. If he had to create cocktails, like they would look like that. Yeah.
You mean the guy that removed part of his brain?
Yes. He had his friend, who's played by Leonard Nimoy, to remove part of his brain.
Right. So, that is a good shout. I'd totally forgotten that it was Spock. So good.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of makes live long and prosper ironic, but never mind. Yeah. Anyway, so that guy, the guy that had lobotomized himself, he would make these cocktails.
He would.
You are selling them. Wow.
Wait, so
Because he makes like his own drugs during the show. This is my own special version of LSD.
right. Here's what
He
I
would
mixed up
make
in my
these cocktails.
shoe.
Yeah.
We call it the lobotomov.
now,
That is nice.
wow.
Yeah.
Now,
We're going to make these in the studio.
Are these drinks made by this guy, or he sent a link?
No, we're talking about a fictitious character in the TV show.
No. But you said somebody in the beginning.
Yeah, you mentioned.
Oh, Russell. You know Russell. I can't think of his last name.
Boschman?
Yes, Bolshman. Thank you. Is that how you say his last name?
Boschman, yeah.
Did I butcher? I always butcher it. Boakman.
Okay.
Production staff says it's Boakman. I'm going with production staff.
He makes these?
Lobotoman.
The voice. Yeah, he says he can make these. And I was like, what are you talking about? Then I saw his article. I'm like, whoa, we need to have these on the show.
Why is he not? Why is he not here?
Right.
Why is he not here making them? Right.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
we'll make that happen.
Also, where are the tiki drinks?
Jack couldn't make it.
There's not so much as a little paper umbrella for my glass, like nothing.
I could probably get you a paper umbrella.
It's fine.
Maybe a cherry.
Wow.
We got good cherries.
We have really good cherries.
Now I feel like
And
we're talking.
Bourbon in place of...
So Paul, can we go full circle and talk a little bit of policy again with my lone little article up there?
I do want to talk about how Edward Snowden is an FSC-king idiot. Yes.
So apparently, Gizmodo, who wrote this article, said that Snowden was a virtual speaker at some conference he went to. You can read the article.
Yeah.
And he had some great statements like, law is simply letters on a page. If you want to build a better future, you're going to have to do it yourself. Politics will take us only so far. And if history is any guide, they are the least effective means of seeing change we want to see.
Why are the ads on this page like two people doing it?
What?
There's two people. Did you see
click on that link? Help
But there was.
Are these people really fucking in Trump Tower? Not
That's-
safe for work.
Right, they really took the operative word in the title of this article and ran with it with the links. Yeah.
Targeted advertising for the win. Wait, what?
so.
The keyword.
Yeah,
it's a keyword.
that was really scary.
Government employees on Trump. Everything is fucked. Yeah.
I love that though. Law is simply letters, letters on a page.
Letters on a page.
I mean,
so
well, he's
policy
right.
is
Yeah,
simply
right. I was
letters
going
on
to
a
say, he's
page.
not wrong.
Technically, he's right.
Technically,
Yeah.
Regulation is simply letters on a page.
Technically, he's right.
yes, he is.
Well, you can debate the meaning of the word simply.
At least
Is it literally letters on a page? No, nobody uses paper anymore.
Well, I mean, are
all
we ready for
digital.
a break yet? Because my drink's empty.
Is it literally
So
or figuratively? What is the word for figuratively? It's literally. Literally the word for figuratively is literally, right? Okay, we'll let you think
The
about
law-
that one. Sorry, Harley, you had a comment there?
So the
Congressional
letters on the
staffer,
page,
go.
the letters on the page are just the transcription of the law. I think that it sounds honestly. I think that it sounds really arrogant to just dismiss organized society when not everybody has the technical acumen of somebody like Edward Snowden. The policy in the end is what many, many people in America and around the world are left with. And it means that they live or die on it. And maybe it's just letters on a page, but it's also more than that, because there's a lot of institutions that follow those letters on the page. And policy matters a great deal. And many companies, many technological innovations, in the end, don't matter a great deal to a lot of people who are struggling to eat, for example, or struggling to just get a job or live on minimum wage. I think technology is really important, but to say that to suggest that it doesn't matter at all, I think is very, very short-sighted, to say the least.
Well, and what's interesting, Harley, is that I was glad this wasn't an article about Edward Snowden being like the technical security expert for the news, because I'm kind of tired of that. I'm like, that wasn't like his thing. Like, he's not the world's foremost expert on security. Like, he stole secrets. That's what he's known for, not commenting on the latest IoT security device thing.
I think, here's the thing, right? I think the article's title sums it up pretty well. But I think there's a challenge here where there is a bigger problem of we hear this hyperbole around how like the government are all idiots, they don't know what they're doing, it's super corrupt, all this kind of stuff. And like I'm not going to say there are not problems, sure, and the system has challenges, but the reality is that when people talk like that, I'm always a little bit like, what am I meant to do with this information? Am I meant to stage a coup? Are we doing that? Like, is that what we're doing now? Are we going to go and stage a coup? Are we going to march on the Capitol? Because I'm British, and apparently we've burnt down the White House before. So I'm gay.
You can do it again.
But if that's
in
not
your
what
blood.
we're doing, right? Exactly. But
Technically,
if
it wasn't the White House when you burned it down.
oh,
But go ahead.
details. Come on now.
Semantics.
But if that's not what we're doing,
It's just laws. It's just words on a page. It wasn't the White House at the time.
exactly.
Well,
Right,
that's
exactly.
the Constitution.
It's flames on a
just words
painting.
on a page.
But like-
it's not even a page. It's
But here's the thing: is if that's not what we're doing, if we're not going to go and do that, and I think probably we're not. I mean, I think you guys would need some more drinks in you before I could convince you to do this. So if we're not going to do that, then the reality is this is the law of the land. The system is the system. We have a government in place that we elected, and we can discuss that another time.
Sure.
And so if that's the case, then having all this hyperbole about them being evil or stupid or whatever particular vernacular you want to use is just really unhelpful, because the reality is that we have to figure out how to work with people and work with the system to find solutions.
On that
well
note,
said.
The solutions part is really key, and because that is in the end, that is what we ask our government to do. We ask them to come up with solutions, and that is way harder than just coming up with problems. And most of what I hear out of Edward Snowden, and some of the other people who follow his ideology, is just pointing out problems. It's not really solutions.
Did you say idiotology?
Yes, that too. With
not what I
that,
said.
we're going to take a short
you
break.
make an idiot from the
Unfortunately,
cheap
we're
seats.
running short on time. We're going to take a short break. Come back. Stay tuned. More Security Weekly coming at you.